working well as a team. And we start having them point out some things they see where their ratings are the same. And then, are there some other things you see that are interesting or you might want to bring up? And so we hopefully get a safe format for them to talk about some of the teaming things. Now, what we did get from a couple of paraprofessionals is that they liked this, because I remember one paraprofessional said, no one ever has asked in all the years, and she had been working for a really long time, no one had ever in her history of working for the school district ever asked her any of these types of questions. And so she appreciated it. Yeah, we probably we didn't solve any teams that weren't working well together. The issue was, paraeducators and teachers maybe not quite seeing eye to eye, but at least it brought about a nice, honest discussion and talking about if this is going to be the way the classroom style operates, how is this going to make a difference when we start doing interventions? What do we need to think about so that this will work for us? Any questions on this? Hey, you guys are quiet and cold, I think. Some of you look like you're shivering. He came in, I said, don't ask me because I'll be walking around and talking, but when you sit, you get really cold in some of these. So we could always, if it gets too cold, if a lot of people are too cold, we could get the temperature adjusted. The other thing that I've been presenting for a long time on these forms, I've had some people have all sorts of different ideas on how to use these forms. One principal said that they were going to use this at the beginning of the school year and have all the teachers, before people get assigned, have all the teachers and have all the paraprofessionals fill these out. And then I think he or she was going to do a Match.com kind of thing. Like, I don't know how, but I'm trying to say, okay, these seem to be the most closely matched together. I'm going to put those two together. I'm not quite sure. I would love to have followed up with them, because I'm not sure if you found one teacher who said, I don't like to do written schedules, and a paraeducator says, I don't want a written schedule. I'm not quite sure you want to pair them up if they were going to do exact matches. So, yeah, you might, I just would have loved to have heard that actually worked. But then other people said they thought they were good interview questions to ask teachers and paraeducators, especially, I don't know about you guys, I used to teach, and no one ever trained me on how you work and collaborate with someone else in your classroom. My training did nothing, and I don't know, maybe it's the trainings that are updated now, maybe they consider it, but I drove my first aide away. She quit because I didn't know how to work with an aide. When you get someone who just graduated from college at 21 and they're in your room and you go, who are you? And they say, I'm your aide. And you go, what do you do? Anything you want? That's too much power for someone who doesn't know how to use it. So I learned very quickly that that's not how you have to be kind of nicer, and you have to be more organized when you work with an aide and clarify things. So it's really a big issue, how do they work together. So we're going to look at a real team and how they completed a teaming survey. The case example we're going to use today to show you how the process worked is Mike. And I'll have to gauge the time as we go through to see if we're going to do all of the activities. Your activities are related to another girl that I call Paris. I could call her Lindsay Lohan too, but I'll still show you her videos, but there may be some activities we'll start skipping through so we make sure we get you out by 2:30. But you'll see Mike for sure in all of his products. Mike was 9 years old at the time he was in the intervention. He was one of the comparison kids. So the first year, he was pink. He was one of the, remember that graph? It wasn't really pink, but in the graph, he was one of the pink kids where he was getting business as usual. And you're going to see business or services as usual in this videotape later on. He does have, in Florida, we call our kids in special ed exceptional student education, or ESC. So that's why you'll see ESC there. That means SPED, special ed. His classification was autism. And you will see him. He definitely fits the criteria. He was in a self-contained classroom. I'm sorry that Florida is not as ahead in inclusion, and especially at that time. They're getting better, but we still have a lot of work to do. They were upper elementary, 6 students, but wide age and size range. You compare Mike to some of the another kid in the room, and there's like about 6 foot difference almost, it looks like. He is nonverbal. How he communicates, and you guys will probably know the gross signs that because he uses simple signs. In the videotapes that you watch, you'll see he uses primarily signs at this point. He also, during the intervention, got an augmentative communication device, a dynamite. You'll see that in one of the baseline clips. You're not going to see it in the intervention clip because in between, before we got the intervention, he threw his dynamite and had to go back to the shop. So he got a, not a cheap talk, but one of those other voice output devices that's a little easier to use. He also has pictures, visuals, PECs and things like that to communicate. So he has a combination of things. He doesn't have one consistent communication system. You guys will recognize right away that that's a big deal when somebody doesn't have a communication system. And he's 9. And sadly, that's not unusual to see kids 9 years of age in our classrooms with autism who are nonverbal and still don't have a consistent, well-taught communication system that's being used in a functional way. On this team was the teacher, 2 aides, and the PTR consultant. So there were 4 people on this team. So you're going to see a video in a little while, for step 2. For step 1, we're just going to go ahead and let you look at how this team completed their forms. So you're going to look in your activity packet on page 3. What you see there is the comparison of the work styles. Now this comparison sheet is a bit different than the one I showed you earlier. Let me get it here for a second. To make it easier for you guys, you didn't have to flip back and forth to the actual instrument, is we put the actual wording of the questions here. The top one is what the teacher work style shows. The one on the bottom is the one the paraprofessionals see. Okay, so you know what the questions are. Here we put for Mike's team what the teacher rated, and then the third column, there's 2 paraeducators, what they rated. So we put both of their ratings. Like for example, the teacher said that she supervises paraeducators closely. She gave that a 5. She strongly agreed with that. Paraeducators, from their perspectives, I like to be supervised closely. 1 said 3 and 1 said 4. Now the first one in each of these columns is always that same paraeducator. So that same paraeducator who rated 3 for number 1, rated 4 for number 2, 5 for number 3, 3, 5, 3, etc. Second paraeducator is always the second one. So that's what you have there. I want you to look at that. And if you were this was your team, and you were facilitating this team, what are some things that you might hope that they discuss when you talk about how they work together? The next 2 pages is the classroom team survey that they completed and how that is completed to let you understand who did what. We bolded what the team selected. So our team meets for planning purposes. One of the 3 people said we do this bi-monthly. 2 people said we do this weekly. Okay, so that's how you can interpret it. The second one, our team plans daily classroom activities collaboratively. 1 person says occasionally. 2 people said almost always. Okay, so there you have an idea of you don't know who said what. We don't tell you the teacher or the paraeducator said these, but you have an idea of how together they completed this. And then finally at the very end, the bulleted points on page 5 of your packet, those are just the responses we got to the open-ended questions. So what I want you to do is not take long. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. In your team, just review how Mike's team responded to the teaming forms and identify a couple of things that you think would be things you'd like to bring up if you were this person's consultant or coach or facilitator. So I'll give you 5 minutes. Okay. I know that didn't give you a whole lot of time. And sometimes if we have a lot more time, I give people more time to really digest this and look at it. And it's amazing because usually when I do this, You guys don't even know this team. You don't even have faces to this team. I get all these analyses, these deep analyses about their personalities and everything. So this is what these little work style surveys do. It makes us all be kind of quasi-psychoanalysts. What would you say are some of the issues you might think you would want them to discuss? What about their work style surveys? What similarities and differences did you see? Yes.
They have big differences because I like to give explicit directions for each task, and I like to be told how to do each task.
Okay, so she's saying number 9. Right here. Let me make it a little bigger. Okay, so the teacher STEM is I give explicit directions for each task. She rated that a 4, so she agreed with that. The paraeducator said, for I like to be told how to do each task. They were on the other side, the disagree side, weren't they? Okay, so what's your take on that? Yes?
I think that it's the wording of that sort of throws in a little bit of a problem. Like maybe instead of saying I like to be told how to do each task, it should say I am given explicit directions for each task.
That would be better. It would be more aligned with it, huh? You could certainly change it. I'm sure Marilyn Friend won't mind. She gave us permission to put this in the book, in the actual manual, and it is cited in the manual, and you could certainly go ahead and adapt it. So yeah, maybe you would get a different type of response. Yes?
I like how it's worded that way because some people are the kind of people that like just tell me what to do and I'll do it, and other people are I want to try things out my own way. So I think having it worded that way, you get a feeling for where the person stands as far as that, if they're the kind of person that wants to be told or if they want to try things out for themselves.
Right. Yes, so it could go either way. And again, you have freedom to use these in the way you think are the best way to use them. Yes?
I think it's hard to do. I mean, if I was doing this for myself, each task, okay, am I like giving explicit directions on how I want things organized, or am I giving explicit directions on how I want you to do this with a student?
Yeah.
You know, it
so you feel it's pretty too broad and it could change in different circumstances, different contexts. Yeah, and you know, most surveys like these, they're trying to force black and white responses to very complex issues. But in general, you get an idea. If you have a lot more widespread disagreements than agreements, you could probably be safe to come to a conclusion that maybe this team at least has different ideas on how they approach their work. Does not necessarily mean they don't work well together, but it's just they have different ways of looking at how they work. Do those different ways of looking at how we work impact the classroom functioning? That will impact the intervention. That's really what we're trying to get at this, which is why we don't try to say anybody's wrong or anybody needs to fix anything here. It's just let's talk about it. First you and then you. Yeah.
I like it because I'm going to be working with parapros on communication and how to be assertive in communication. So if you have these major differences, how to go ahead and speak to your educator, your teacher, but this is what I need, because we have a lot who won't say anything.
Right.
But we'll talk about it in the lunchroom.
Yes.
So.
We love that, admiring the problem in the lunchroom, right? She said that often, you know, she likes using something like this because communication between teachers and paraeducators is sometimes lacking. People don't always express what they need or what they want. Instead, they may complain about it in the lunchroom about, oh, this teacher or oh, this paraeducator. So this might help not only for our behavior team, but just for in general, how's the team function. Let's move on to the other form, and then so that we can get you on your break. Any issues you saw here? I don't have the whole form up. Yes?
Not so much an issue, but just something that you could use to kind of guide the team. They saw help each other as a strength. Back to number 9 on the other one where they weren't matching up.
Yeah.
And also number 4, it talked about the materials that would be used and who would decide using the materials. So you could kind of maybe bridge that as, hey, you guys said that that's a strength, so I don't know, kind of tie that together.
Right. Yeah, you could certainly use this to really praise the strengths of the team and how they work well together. Did anybody question what's going on with these meetings in 1 and 2?
Well, we were saying that maybe sometimes if the parent and teacher are working together and they may have a prep, they call that a meeting because they're talking.
Right.
But the other one wasn't there because she was working with some other kid in another room.
Right, right. And that's part of what happened in this case, the team, because, it's like, okay, so what's going on? One of you is around, one of you is not. The other thing is the teacher, this was, I think, a late school. So in the morning is when they had their kind of prep time. But one of the aides wasn't available to always talk and meet because one of the aides had other duties. They had to go out, I think, to the bus duty or something like that, so they weren't always available. And so it wasn't an intentional, I'm not coming to the meetings. It was, I'm not available to come to the meetings. That's really important, though, when you're talking about communication, is if you're going to work as a team and one of your team members is almost very rarely at the meetings, what do? If you can't change the time of the meeting, how do you get the information to the paraeducator, paraprofessional, so that the paraprofessional feels he or she is still part of the team and has some input in what's going to happen? Yes?
I think that was kind of addressed later, though, in talking about some of the strengths they thought they had were in communication. So maybe they're not always at the meeting, but they're communicating the needs with that person at a different time.
Right. They have, what's your strengths as a team? You can see the second bullet. We have good communication. Now, what's interesting, though, is that's a strength, but somebody still thought it needed to be addressed as something that would make us better. Increased communication. It could have been that person who was saying, I'm not at these meetings. Or it could have been the teacher saying, I'm not able to find the time to communicate with my aides effectively. So yeah, it's really interesting, and people, again, enjoy using these for other purposes than just behavior meetings, but it's basically, like I said, to just identify potential issues. We're not going to spend any more time on this because I'm going to let you go on break, and when we come back from break, we're going to go into step 2, which is identifying the problem, and then you're going to actually see Mike, our little guy. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I think it's 15 minutes, right?